Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Whatcha Watching right here on the Hollywood Critics Association YouTube channel, Facebook page, and Twitter channel. I am Scott Menzel. I'm going to be the host of the second episode of our horror special. We have another group of horror aficionados here today, and I'm going to introduce them one by one, and they're going to lead the conversation today. Instead of me being here and throwing in my 2 cents, I am going to just be the moderator, and they are going to take it away from this show moving forward. So starting off from Nightmare Conjurings, we have Shannon Mccrew.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So last week, we basically, when we did the introductions, we said why you were chosen for this episode. So what makes you qualified to do a horror-themed episode?
I'm the founder of Nightmarish Conjurings, which is a horror-based entertainment site. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. And then we got over here to Matt Donato. How are you, sir? Oh no,
I was muted. I'm doing better now. Sorry, I didn't want to make everything all funky when you guys were doing the intros. Didn't know I was going second there.
What makes your love of horror? Why are you here on this episode?
I think the simple thing is you can count on me to review at least 110 to 120 new release horror movies per year. So I think that counts for something.
I think I would agree with that statement. And of course, we have Stacey Lane Wilson. How are you?
Hello.
And you have a background in this industry. Tell me a little bit about it, and for the viewers.
Okay, yes, I do. I own and operate the new website, womeninhorror.com, and I am also the producer of a feature anthology film called She Venge, which is all directed by women.
Awesome. And then last but certainly not least, you may know him from Meet the Movie Press. You may know him from Forbes. You may know him from E! News, somewhere else, everywhere else. And now Mr. Quibi himself, Simon Thompson.
Yeah, hi. And also Variety. My work on Variety. Basically, anyone that'll have me. I mean, the reason I'm here is I actually died in 1862, sold my soul to the devil, and was brought back as this. So, having lived the dream of horror, I thought I might be quite good at this.
Awesome. All righty. Thank you, Simon. All right. So again, how this show will work is we're going to be doing almost like a roundtable discussion. Each of the 4 members is going to say one of their selections, talk a little bit about it. If other members have seen it, at the end, we are going to do kind of like a discussion about that film, what their opinions were. And we're actually going to start off with Shannon Mccrew, and she's going to tell us what the first horror pick is for Whatcha Watching.
So my first horror pick would be the HBO series Lovecraft Country, which premiered this past Sunday. It's from showrunners and executive producers Misha Green, Jordan Peele, and J.J. Abrams. And it centers around a young African-American male named Atticus, who essentially goes on a journey to find his missing father. That's just the kind of simple basis of the show. It is not based off of any of H.P. Lovecraft's writing. There's been a lot of confusion about that. It's incorporating themes that deal with systemic racism in the 1950s and unfortunately today, as well as monsters and creatures that one would find from a Lovecraft story. So it combines the two into this really incredible series that is heartfelt and terrifying in multiple different ways. So that's kind of the basis of the show, just off the bat. If anyone wants to jump in, that's seen the first episode. Or not, I can keep talking about it.
So if anyone wants to give a little bit of opinion. I know this is run for one episode. Some of us have seen more than one episode, thanks to HBO and the screeners. But since most of America and the world have only seen episode one, if anyone wants to chime in who has actually seen it, I would love to hear your take on it as well.
I think for me, one thing that I really liked about this, and I've never read the book. I was not familiar with the source material. I know a lot of people have been raving about that. But I think it's one of the bolder things that I think I've seen on TV in probably about 18 months or so when it comes to this kind of genre content. We've seen a lot of really bold programming, but this is really something completely different. And I mean, aside from the fact that it looks so incredibly lush and rich, just the tone of the whole thing was absolutely incredible, but not in a way that it was jarring. It really brings together the supernatural stuff, the monster element, and the characterization. And it really, in the first episode, it sets out every single thing that you need to know, but not in a way that is ham-fisted or hits you over the head with anything. It doesn't seem hammy. It doesn't seem sort of, Panto-esque. It's, I was just very impressed by the way the whole thing was handled. I mean, it's dark and it's gritty, and I think it's going to get nasty at points, which I'm actually quite looking forward to. And I'm glad that they haven't shied away from that. But it's probably one of the most intriguing things that I think I've seen. And I think it's going to be a really good gateway show for people who don't think of themselves as a fan of the genre or know anything about H.P. Lovecraft or the world that, he kind of created and his heritage. I was genuinely impressed.
Yeah. Oh. Okay, I was gonna say, the show gets and I'm not gonna go into the additional episodes, but it gets wild. If you're familiar with weird fiction and cosmic horror, it does definitely happen throughout. I saw the first 5 episodes, and it gets pretty wild as it goes. But I think what's really important is, for those who aren't familiar, H.P. Lovecraft was very racist, and this show allows, Black voices to reclaim weird fiction in a way that we haven't seen before. It allows the topics of racism to be discussed very bluntly, which I also think is hugely important, but it also has enough entertainment so it's not completely lost on people. I was actually surprised there wasn't a huge pushback after the first episode. I was convinced that there was going to be just, so many angry people, and there wasn't. And I think, at least that I didn't see, and I think that that's great. And I think that, I think it was last year's Watchmen, I think Lovecraft Country is being set up to be one of the most important series to have debuted.
Yeah, I'm curious to see it. I haven't watched the first episode yet, but I did read the book, and it was a fascinating book and very well written. Although it was a bit labyrinthine, I guess you could say. It's easy to get lost in all the entwining stories, but I thought it was very interesting, and I think it's a great thing that they made it into a series.
For me, I think, I use my wife as a barometer because she's not a fan of horror at all. And we watched the first episode, I think it was the day after it aired on HBO. And she was genuinely impressed, and she wants to watch more. So to be honest with you, if my wife is an average kind of barometer person out there who really had no knowledge of this, no intention of watching it, but after watching an episode was genuinely keen to stick around and see more. I mean, that to me is kind of even better than some reviews, which will be glowing. I think when you can take someone like that and convert them and then keep them interested and want to watch more, I think that speaks volumes, perhaps more than a 5-star review. And I think the strong reviews that it's got are really justified. I think your point, Shannon, about the fact that obviously it does tackle racism and it does tackle a lot of issues to do with being Black in America, especially in this period. And you might expect more. There's a part of the community who may eye roll at that. It's like, oh, here we go, because obviously that's an issue that gets tackled by a lot more movies these days, which is really important. But I think it's the way that this is handled. It isn't. Even though it's very much as a narrative, it's in the foreground. It's not dominant. which I think for those people that may sometimes be resistant, that borderline resistance, they will be willing to kind of look at this and visit it in their own way, which I think is better than not visiting it at all.
Yeah, I think it's powerful in the fact that it shows it's not just like, hey, this is a show that's dealing with racism. It actually is like showing how racist beliefs in that time period affected Black Americans without having to consistently keep saying this is racism, this is racism, this is racism.
Which,
and then there's like really awesome creatures.
It was really not that long ago when you look at it. This is not set in an alternative world. This is set decades ago.
Kind of in an alternative world, maybe.
Yeah, obviously we don't have monsters, but yeah.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to the second topic. Matt, what have you been watching?
I love how we're going to transition from Lovecraft into I don't want to say dumb, but one of the lowest common denominators of like horror in that way. But yeah, number one, like I wasn't silenced during the Lovecraft stuff because I disagreed with anything being said. I want that to be clear. I just haven't seen it yet, so I couldn't comment on anything. But my pick is called Uncle Peckerhead. And I know you're immediately going to have these connotations of sounding like some direct to road trip VOD kind of thing, but it's not that at all. And Uncle Peckerhead is about a band in New Jersey, an indie punk band to be specific. They want to open for their heroes, this like larger punk band who does everything right. And if everything goes well, they get the gig, and they not only do they get the gig, but they get the chance to maybe play for their label. And what happens is everything that can go wrong for any band in any indie horror movie or just any indie movie that you can think of. And the band loses their van, all these things, bad luck all around. So they start canvassing a parking lot and seeing if anyone will drive them around New Jersey, the area, and play these small little venues and basically be their roadie. So, of course, this creepy guy says yes, because who else is going to say yes to that? And it is a man who refers to himself as Peck, because everyone only calls him Uncle Peckerhead, hence where the name comes from. It's not some ridiculous, like, over-the-top, Uncle Peckerhead connotations. It's not anything like that. But what happens is a really oddly sweet story about a band that is in it for the right reasons, and they're not just chasing fame, and it's fueled by passion, and they're very spunky together, and they're very fantastic. And you get to watch this band come together and realize what they have is one, as a demonic roadie presents himself at night, turns into a demon, and starts eating their problems.
All right. So I'm guessing that's a strong recommendation from you, since no one else has seen it.
It is honestly a recommendation for me, because it's that, like, listen, it's like that 3 out of 5 kind of indie horror. If you really need clean kind of mainstream quality, Uncle Peckerhead will be a tiny bit below what you're used to. But for me, it gets by on the passion. It gets by on being Jersey. It gets by on demons, and it gets by on punk rock. So yeah, I actually left that film really kind of uplifted by watching their journey, and you get some good gore moments in there too. So recommendation for the little guys there.
Awesome.
I didn't know
Thank
it
you
took
very
place
much.
in Jersey. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a Jersey movie.
Oh my God, I have to watch it now.
Yeah, exactly. That was I didn't realize it until after 2, and I was like, Jersey boy, punk rock. Like, yeah, no, this is everything for me.
I lived in Jersey for like a few years, so now I have to. You've just won me over, so
I'm from Jersey, so.
Oh, there you go.
4 years in Jersey. I'm born and raised there, so.
Wow.
So I'm guessing, obviously, from your description, Matt, this is based on a true story.
Absolutely. It's
okay.
a coming of age story for a young band that has, run into demonic roadies.
Yeah, I just wanted to check. Yeah, it sounded very real.
100%.
Simon.
I'd rather that or a documentary. I couldn't decide between the two.
Yeah. All right, Stacey, take it away. What you watching?
Well, the show that I want to talk about is Dracula, which is a BBC Netflix collaboration, original 3-part limited miniseries. And it's actually, each episode is as long as a feature-length movie. So, and it takes all the little bits of myth and Gothic atmosphere and even a little bit of nunsploitation, but it totally works. It's kind of got that kitchen sink approach, but it's also Extremely atmospheric. The actor who plays Dracula, Claes Bang, he really looks the part, and he has the same kind of gravitas, I think, as a Christopher Lee or a Frank Langella in that role. He's tall, dark, and handsome. The show is pretty lush and gory, and it's got a lot of, as I said, gothic sort of feel to it. The final episode, though, does take a bit of a turn. I know there were some complaints from fans who loved the first two, and then the third one, they said, okay, what happened here? But I actually kind of liked it. I like how it took a turn, a little unexpected. So that is my pick for what to watch on television and streaming.
Thank you so much, Stacey. All right, now we move on to Mr. Simon. Go ahead. What you watching?
Well, The Beach House is something that dropped on Shudder probably about a month ago now. I'm not going to lie. Shudder's horror game right now for movies that they're premiering is incredibly strong. When they started as a streamer, certainly in the last couple of years, some of their stuff was patchy, but really they are turning out taking on some very, very strong product right now. And while sometimes they might not be particularly original, or they certainly, are riddled with tropes, they often have something, interesting to do around that. And this is no difference really. The Beach House. Fundamentally, it's about two teenagers, two young adults who go away for a weekend in a house that they think is empty, and it's not. There are people who are already staying there. And so they form this friendship with them, but there's something not quite right. And basically what happens is it's very Invasion of the Body Snatchers-esque, because things start turning up on the beach. There's a very weird fog that descends. All the things that you kind of seen before happen in this movie, but there's something unique about how they play that out, and the reactions between the guys. It's a very small cast. It's like 4, maybe 5 people that really have anything to do with anything in this movie. But it's how they do it, I think, that actually really elevates this movie to something that makes it particularly interesting. It's also not particularly long, which I'm seeing quite a lot recently with a lot of the most inventive horrors. We're going to be talking about Host later on. They're not outstaying their welcome. They're not trying to be anything more than exactly what they are, which is just entertaining. Going through and doing something new with stuff we've perhaps seen before. The cast is generally no name. You will recognize a few people from various other things you might have seen, but something I'm enjoying about this particular stuff that Shudder is doing, it's having 1 or 2 people that from stuff, but the star power is never overbearing. So it's actually a lot easier for you to get immersed in the stories and the stuff that is going on, and not necessarily watching people because they're a big name actor. I was a fan of this. It's not the best thing I've seen this year by any stretch, but it plays really nicely with elements and stuff you've seen before. I mentioned Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Also, you can tell there are elements of things like the fog, because obviously the fog element of this, it really is. It's comfortably familiar, but feels original enough to be an entertaining, hour and a half, 2 hours that actually you don't regret. And I've seen quite a few movies in the last couple of weeks where 90 minutes seem to go on forever. So, it's an entertaining distraction. Nothing particularly new, but adds that extra layer to something you're already familiar with. So, but rather than watching the same old movies that you love again and again, I think it was fun. It surprised me. I'll be very honest with you. The tension is there as well. Matt, you also saw this, right?
I did see this. Would you like me to give my opinion first?
What you think? Yeah.
I am glad you're very enthusiastic about The Beach House. It did not work for me at all. You mentioned a lot of things about it being Invasion of the Body Snatchers-esque, Lovecraftian-esque. It's all the esques without being any of that. It never gets there. It never gets to a level where it's actually doing any of that comparison any justice, in my opinion. It is about 2 couples in a beach house that didn't know they were going to be there, and they're trying to hash that out. And that setup takes so long, and it introduces some cool character elements, like the girl who's basically the heroine, the final girl, we can call her, that kind of stereotype. She's introduced as this girl who wants to go back to school and become this basically scientist of something oceanic and study the unknown and do all these things. Like, you're being set up to be the character who solves everything through ingenuity and intelligence. And then the third act abandons all of that. It just turns her into a just generic character, which completely removes everything, like all the character building you've done, and everything she says that she possesses, she forgets in the third act. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, so you didn't know how to end your movie after it's all Lovecraftian and cool for a few minutes, and then it turns into something that I just didn't dig. That it's, not going to love everything. And for me, Sea Fever is the movie you're describing. Like when I watch Sea Fever, that's everything you're describing to me, where it is the Lovecraftian-esque, it is the deep dive into the unknown, and it even, uses the aquatic element too. So for me, like that was my comparison the whole time. I'm glad people love The Beach House. Sea Fever is my The Beach House.
I'm not aware of Sea Fever, but I think on your criticisms, the only thing I would kind of, I can entirely see why you feel the way you do, but for me, the only thing that was genuinely lacking with this was, I can't decide whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, but was the why and the wherefore, because there wasn't a lot of explanation about what the end result or the intention of this was, or where any of this came from. And I don't know whether it's because that ambiguity is something that they wanted to play on and leave that to the viewer to theorize about, or whether it's just like they didn't know what to frame it with. So that, to be honest with you, would be my only criticism of that.
And I kind of think, just playing off that really quickly, and then I'll let somebody else go, horror kind of follows trends, and A24 has been owning the horror game in a way of late, and A24 has been doing that with these endings that leave you pondering. Their type of horror leaves you with a question, and it leaves you with something that's not finite because the unknown is scary. And it works sometimes. And honestly, it works for A24 most than other production companies. But I'm seeing more and more of these films that try to get that same vibe without the buildup that is in a movie like The Witch, or without the buildup that is in a movie, another A24 horror movie, that it needs to exist. And to me, The Beach House doesn't earn its ending. It doesn't earn anything to get there. It's, ooh, here's some ponderous things. Ooh, here's a weed brownie. Oh man, here's some trippy visuals. By the way, water zombies. And it's kind of like, okay, sorry, third act, not for me.
Shannon or Stacey, you want to chime in on this one?
I didn't see it. I don't think I will. It sounds very good to me.
I think that Sea Fever and The Beach House are like the perfect double feature. Sea Fever is phenomenal. If you have not seen it.
Stacey loved Sea Fever.
Oh,
being sarcastic.
I think both films are really great. I think that both films also deal with Lovecraftian elements, and I think just kind of like with Color Out of Space, there's not always an explanation for why things need to happen. I do agree that the third act, sometimes you need a little bit more to kind of make that story come together as a whole. And I get when dealing with themes that are, I'm just going to keep using Lovecraftian because it's way too hot to think of like any other type of word right now. I think it's a very dangerous path to go down, because if you can't nail that third act, then it kind of dissolves. I don't think that it completely dissolved in The Beach House. I do think that Sea Fever is the stronger of the two, due to many different reasons. But I think that The Beach House was trying, and they were trying to get a little bit of that cosmic horror in there too. And they definitely had some issues, but overall, I think it was a really solid. God, I'm like awful with words right now.
Okay.
It's so hot.
Wait, Shannon, did you mean to use dissolved as a pun?
I don't even remember saying dissolve.
Very, very thematic for The Beach House.
Yes, I meant to use it. Absolutely.
Giving you points for that.
Well,
I think. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, since you're on a roll, you get to go next anyhow to talk about another movie. So.
All right. Well, I am here to talk about Hosts, which is probably the biggest surprise of quarantine for me. I had one of my writers review it. They were really excited. And as soon as she was finished, she had reached out to me and was like, yo, this movie is really terrifying. Like I had a really tough time watching it. And those within the horror genre, you know, we've heard that saying so many times, like, oh, it's so scary that you won't be able to sit through it. And I'm just gonna, like, full disclosure, I watched that movie like super stoned, like unbelievably stoned, and my partner was in the other room, and I just kept jumping out of the chair outside when I was watching it and screaming at the screen. Like I was legitimately terrified. And then the next day I rewatched it with my partner so he could experience it with me. But essentially it's about 6 friends that come together via Zoom during the quarantine, and for some reason decide to have a seance, which you should never have, especially over Zoom, and shit just goes completely sideways. And how Rob Savage was able to incorporate these incredible practical effects and make the story relevant to what we're all experiencing while also making it completely terrifying was just astounding. It's one of the best things I've seen this year, and probably the movie that has scared me the most.
I'm not going to lie. I didn't watch this stoned. I watched it in broad daylight, and I almost shit my pants. There are a couple of points in this that were so effective, that other movies in this that are trying to do this kind of thing simply haven't managed with the tension. And I think part of this is because it really licked along. I mean, there's no fat on this movie at all. It's super lean. It's less than 60 minutes. And you have characters that you have to get to know very, very quickly. And that is not easy to do without laying it on with a trowel. And, you know, they managed it. You genuinely were interested in these characters. You were invested in what was happening to them and completely engaging within the first 5 minutes of the movie, which, considering they're not doing a lot, is a real credit to everybody involved. I was really impressed. I was skeptical about this, but I was genuinely very impressed. And I don't think the people involved in the movie expected it to get the reception that it did to quite some strong degree. I think it's taken everybody involved a little bit by surprise, even though they obviously believed in the project.
That attic scene scared the ever-loving shit out of me. Like,
the Teddy scene is what got me. The Teddy scene
Oh
when
my
he's running around. I mean, the things you see while it's happening, you kind of know. And I think I'll just go really quick, I guess. Then, like my favorite part about Host is it's kind of expected in every scare and everything that you see. It is by the books, but it's so effective, and it's so effective in a way that Screen Life hasn't been for a little bit too. Like for me, like the first Unfriended, still go back to that, is pretty good. The Den is probably my favorite, but Host is so tremendous at doing exactly what Simon said. It's 54 minutes. It gets in, it gets out, and it uses the conventions that we're all used to. Like we've all been on Zoom calls for the pandemic since March. I've been on one every Saturday with my friends, and everything in this movie is what we deal with. The wonky connection, the friend who is on the phone, the friend who takes it out here, the one friend who has to play with the backgrounds or has to use the filters. It's all stuff I'm used to, and it's all weaponized against me in a way that I'm like, is this happening to me? And then so what we did on that Saturday Zoom call, after I watched it and went to the same way Shannon discovered it from one of her writers, I went to like one of my friends in the group and I was like, yo, I just watched Host and it's way better than any of us had any right to think it was. And they watched it. So then to the larger group, we're like, all right, we're all going to start our Saturday Zoom call with candles, lights out, and we're all watching this movie together. So we did the exact same. We didn't do a seance. We're not that dumb. You don't tempt fate and fucking dark magic and stuff. But we did it, and halfway through, I kind of looked back at the Zoom, and it was funny to see who had turned their lights back on already, who was like cowering like right this against the screen, and who kept like turning away at certain points. It's so effective. It's so good. And talking to Rob Savage, I interviewed him. They had no idea what they made. They had no idea because Savage, one of his answers was like, listen, I took this gig because it was something to do in quarantine, and if it sucked, no one would remember it. It would be the it would be the Zoom movie in a way, but he's like, it's not a pandemic movie. It's a Screen Life movie. I'm adamant about that. I'm like, I totally agree. But he's like, still, if it sucked, no one was going to remember it, and we could just walk away from it, and I could go to my next project with Sam Raimi. But Instead, I made one of the best horror movies of the year. And it's like, it's a nice cherry on top to do something with your friends. They all knew each other. They're all friends. And, to walk away with such a success. And I really do hope this normalizes shorter horror movies. And the fact that it's no longer short and feature, you can make a 60-minute movie that is just noose tight in the way that it is so dreadful. And you can do it in that time. You don't need to stretch it to 90 minutes into the dark.
A question very quickly, because I know we have to move on, but obviously the success of this, everybody these days, it's like if something is successful, therefore you do a sequel. One and done with this, or would you be open for more? Personally, I enjoyed it so much. I'm like, this. I don't want you to do this again. You can't top this because you're going to be doing effectively copying it. I would just leave it as the one.
I would agree.
Now. Go ahead. Sorry. I didn't.
Everyone was just like, no, very quickly. They were like, no.
No, I'm into it. No, Rob Savage wants to do a sequel, and he says he has a completely different idea than what he did already. So he already has an idea for a sequel, and he's just waiting for Shudder to come back to him. And he said there's scares he didn't get to use because of the pandemic. He had certain things where he wanted to bring people into other windows and things like that. So he has a bag of tricks he didn't even get to use in the first one. And for him to say, like, I have a creative idea that I'm just as passionate about, and it is nothing like what you've seen already. Yes, give me that sequel.
If it's not like what he did, then I would be down for that. I mean, I don't really care.
Well, it's going to happen either way, or it's not going to happen. So we have no control.
I think on Shudder budget, I think it'll happen. That movie costs nothing.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, take it away with your second pick.
We're at me already. Okay, cool. So my second pick is a sequel to a movie that you might or might not know, Train to Busan. To me, honestly, one of the best zombie films that we've had of the decade, 2016. So you think about that decade, and I don't think zombies have been better than that. So you're following a pretty high target and bringing back the same director, same crew. And they're like, no, we're going to do another Train to Busan. We're going to continue it. And for those who've seen the first one, no spoilers, but it's a new cast. You can't use the same scenario of a speeding bullet train going to one city, because now we're in Peninsula and now we're 4 years later. And what I love about the sequel is it blows the world wide open. We've been contained in a train for an entire movie before this, and they don't just do a continuation. Like I said, they go ahead 4 years. The pandemic has now turned Korea into a full quarantine while the world has moved on. So first of all, you get this global worldview of commentary from outside countries and news reports talking about Korea while no one's going there or doing anything. And it's landlocked and it's just a zombie wasteland. And the way that I'm describing it, and I am someone who hates hyperbole, I hate the thing of like every movie is the scariest movie I've ever seen, and you say it like 20 times in the same year. But Train to Busan 2 is, I'm going to put these together and it's going to sound insane, and this is Train to Busan 2, Mad Max Fury Road, Romero's Land of the Dead, a Fast and Furious sequel, and also just like any kind of acrobatic, any kind of like Asian martial arts film, just all thrown into one. And I stress... Also, World War Z. Sorry, I got that. World War Z. The good parts, though, because World War Z sucks. So only like the fast-moving zombies and stuff like that. I love it. I feel like not a lot of people are digging it on the same vibe that I am. I feel like it's a natural evolution of what you do in a sequel, because the first one is so good, you cannot recreate the same thing. So you've taken a claustrophobic zombie film that takes place on a speeding train, and now you blow it into an entire universe that is, the first time you get to Peninsula, because it's a team that's basically going on a heist mission to retrieve money for a warlord, because it's in the Peninsula. And it's just it's like I Am Legend. It's like The Last of Us. Just every city is overgrown and covered with nastiness and grime, all this like foliage going crazy. And there's just zombies everywhere. And they move in these herds that are like World War Z. So they're super fast, super crazy. And the way that it's able to get the intensity while still being in this giant arena, we'll call it. And then you get the Land of the Dead influences, because there's a whole militia and all these other different survivors that you didn't know were there, and they form camps and things like that. I love the evolution. I love everything it does. I think it's a phenomenal sequel. I think when you start talking about like 1-2 punches between originals and sequels, REC and REC2 will always be my go-to because I think REC2 might even be better than REC. But Train to Busan 1 and 2 has now entered that conversation for me because I don't know how you do back-to-back zombie films this good.
I'm going to say I enjoyed it, but I was a little bit disappointed. I'm a massive fan of Train to Busan. I thought it was a fantastic movie. Knew very little about it when I watched it on Netflix a number of years ago, and it's probably one of the movies that in the last 5 years I've rewatched the most. I absolutely love that movie. I love the animated prequel, Seoul Station. I thought what they did with that was great as well. This, for me, though, I absolutely agree with you on what the influences are on this, Matt. And I spoke to the director about this. I did an interview with him for Forbes.com. And another movie that I felt was very much an influence was Escape from New York and Escape from LA. It had that element there for me as well. And he admits that, he's a fan of those movies and they were an influence. For me, while I love all the genres and all the influences that are in there, for me, it just didn't have the heart racing tension that we had with Train to Busan. That really didn't feel, because the stakes were different, they didn't feel as high. You knew it was still like, we need to get out of here, otherwise we'll die. But the first part of the movie had that for me as we went along. It just felt that it was becoming something quite different. The stakes were different, and the life or death element just didn't impact as much as it has previously. More character, definitely more character. They have a lot of people in this, and they build characters around all of them. I think it was a little bit overstuffed, but it's certainly far from a bad movie. I know it's getting a little bit of a kicking from some people, but it's genuinely solid. But it doesn't reach the heights that Busan did for me originally. But it certainly bodes well for the future, and the director's already said that he has plans to do another one, another piece of content set in this, whether that's a TV show, whether that's a movie, or whether that is a comic book series. We haven't seen the last of the Train to Busan Presents universe. It was good. It was entertaining, but it's probably a 6 out of 10 for me.
Did you watch Train first and then the sequel? Like, did you watch it? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just curious if you watched the first one and then the second one right after.
No, to be honest with you, I didn't. I did think about doing that. I ummed and ahed, but I decided to just go into this, without having seen the first one again, because honestly, I've seen it so many times and that bar was set so high. I just felt I needed to look at this as part of a universe, but on its own merits. Really, rather than as much as contextualizing it just as a film on itself, because even though it is a sequel, as Matt says, this is not a continuation of the story of the people from that first movie. It's purely the location. It is the thing, and it's not even the location where the first one was set. They have to go to that location. So because it was felt so different, I felt I just wanted to hit this individually. But having it as a double bill would seem like a logical thing to do.
Yeah, and I think that's the kill shot that I see in a lot of reviews, because again, I appear to be one of the only people that's like super high on it, so I'm in the minority in that kind. But the kill shot I see in a lot of people knocking it, like Simon said, a lot of people are kicking the crap out of it right now, and it's that it doesn't live up to Train to Busan to them because they wanted kind of the same thing out of it, and it's just my perspective in the sense where this did something so different and it didn't try to replicate that same thing because they knew they perfected something the first time and they wanted to try something different this time and try something in a way that, to me, I really dug the way it was a commentary on how everyone wanted to take advantage of Korea at this point. Like, Korea is a wasteland. It's a zombie wasteland. And yet you have people paying people to go into it, and the people that are left behind and forgotten in the peninsula and are just left there to kind of fend for themselves. Like, I really dug that angle. And, you think back to Romero and how he used the genre to say so many things about classism and, racism and things of that nature. And honestly, I saw a lot of that in these characters and the way that he explored them. And to me, like, that's what I latched onto. And like, I totally understand like all the other comments, because kind of they are true, but it's just funny to see how, like, one person will take that as a negative and the other takes it as a positive. It's just how criticism works.
And one more thing from me on this, if I had to have another criticism of it, it's the fact there was too much English language. When I'm watching Korean movies, I have no problem with you speaking Korean all the time and I'm reading the subtitles. When they started talking English language quite a bit and in differing abilities, it took me out of the movie somewhat. So I would have just gone for all Korean language and just kept, English language out of that. Just, it felt a little bit too much at times, like it was made more for a Western audience that got onto this, rather than necessarily for the Origins audience.
But is that not also a commentary on the characters that are making them use that language? Because they only use that language when they have to talk to certain people. And those people aren't necessarily good people. So to me, that was more a commentary that they had to use broken language to get through to these people who were paying them to do ridiculous things. And again, who these people were, they all spoke English. I think, again, that goes to the global commentary.
Interesting.
All right, Stacey, you're up.
What I want to talk about is The Wretched, which is an independent horror film that's on Hulu right now, and it's directed by the Pierce brothers. It reminded me a little bit of the VHS 80s days. It's kind of a troubled teen coming of age story. This kid, Ben, he's struggling with his parents' divorce. He's trying to get the attention of the cute girl down the street. He's got a broken arm, it's summer vacation time. The bullies are after him. And he happens to live next door to a 1,000-year-old shape-shifting witch. So it kind of reminded me of Fright Night, if you remember that film. But it's not a humorous movie, though. It doesn't have that comedic element to it at all. But I feel like fans of the genre will feel right at home in Ben's weird world right away. The film does take some time to get off the ground, but once it does, you're in for a gooey, gory ride. There's a lot of practical effects in this by Eric Horn and his team. He's a veteran of the genre, and he does a great job. And the movie's fun. I mean, it's, not the greatest movie of the year, but it was actually released in theaters, drive-ins during the pandemic, and it did quite well. So now that it's on Hulu, everyone can have a chance to see it.
Thank you, Stacey. So just real quick before everyone jumps into the conversation about this, I just want to mention that this was, I think, has become one of the biggest grossing movies since the pandemic has started.
Yeah, it's got the budget and then the profits. It's really done quite well, and more power to them. They did a great job.
Yeah. Didn't it also break a record for consecutive weeks atop the box office?
Well, not that it had a lot of competition, but yeah.
But it's still going to hold a record now. It's crazy what it beat. Yeah.
All right. So, Shannon, why don't we go with you first? What's your take on this? Would you recommend it?
I would. I think it's like Stacey said, it's not the best movie in the entire world, but those practical effects are stunning. The witch is fucking terrifying. And even when she's not in all of her witch glory, and I'm totally blanking on the actress's name that plays her in her human form, just the movements she makes and the spine snapping and I was like, I'm good. Oh my God. It has really incredible elements to it, and the practical effects and the gore are really stunning, and good for the Pierce brothers for just taking control of theaters right now.
This is a movie that I wanted to watch early this year, and I discovered that it was on Hulu quite recently. So it's in my watch list. I think purely from the feel, from what I know of the movie so far, I think the observation about it feeling like those 80s straight-to-video movies, it really does give off that vibe right from the very beginning. But updated, so it doesn't feel like it's a retread of what we've done before. It did feel very much like the kind of horror movie that we are seeing today at that indie end. There's the richer images, the graphics, a little bit hokey, but not hammy. So it's on my watch list. I'm super psyched to watch it because this is right up my street. So.
All right, Matt, go for it.
To chime in, and I was going to say, just to echo what's been said, pretty much everything that everyone here has said is completely true, and that's why I do think it is worth the watch. The witch effects, just mirroring the same thing that you guys said, so good. It's so hard sometimes to get a film that does it all practical and do it the right way, and shy away from the CGI when it's so much easier. And when you see the witch in full form, just spectacular. It goes back to all these old school horror movies. As we've said 100 times, I'm just rehashing the same stuff. I agree with everything said. Watch it on Hulu.
There you go. Closing us out, Simon, what's your last pick?
This is The Pale Door, which is just about to come out. It's, again, this is one of these horror movies that is kind of that low to mid budget that we're seeing a lot of right now. And it's not doing a huge amount that we haven't seen before in other movies. I mean, the fundamental story is that a bunch of robbers, they think they're getting a very big haul. What in fact they get when they board this train and they steal what they're there to steal, it's a box with a young woman in it. They rescue her and the box. They let her out, and she's basically they're led to a brothel, which has led obviously a lot of prostitutes are there. But what they think they're going to get is not what they get. If you've seen movies like I would say Tales of the Crypt, Bordello of Blood, which I love, by the way. So From Dusk Till Dawn, you've seen the hookers from hell killing people. So that in itself is not new. It's also set in the Wild West, which is also a really nice way to do this. Again, that's something that we've seen in sequels to From Dusk Till Dawn. We've seen that kind of thing before. But there is something about this that, and I won't tell you, there's a MacGuffin in this that is actually quite important. It's done really, really well. This is not a movie that a huge amount of money was spent on, but even though you feel like you have seen some of this before, there's something about it that's really entertaining and engaging. And again, it doesn't overstay its welcome. I think it's like 1 hour, 36 minutes. There aren't a huge amount of people in this. You know, there are quite a few background people, but only a handful of core characters. It's got everything. It's got action. You know, it's got a little bit of gore. Some of the deaths are really quite spectacular. And what they've done with changing the prostitutes into these evil beings is really quite simple, but nifty and effective. Again, like I say, it's nothing original, but it's also somehow that familiarity actually makes it more engaging. And it's the way that they play with the tropes that are in play here. And I'll be honest with you, we've talked about a number of movies here, you know, today that are actually, you know, familiar concepts or playing with familiar ideas. And yet they still deliver more on the entertainment stakes and than so many original movies that have been released while we've been in lockdown that haven't connected, engaged, entertained, made you feel something, whether that is and I'm not going to lie, I laughed a couple of times in The Pale Door. This is not like, you know, high tension, high art stuff. There are some bits that are so ridiculous. You're like, it's kind of cool. I'm going to give you that one. But so much more entertaining and engaging than some high level studio movies that we've seen, which are coming out, you know, on VOD and on streaming services. So for me, while not entirely original, it plays with what we already know in a really satisfying way. Not the best film I've seen this year, but it's certainly one of the things I've most enjoyed watching, purely because it does what it does really, really well and doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is.
All right. Anyone who's seen this, feel free to chime in.
Well, I didn't see it, but you did mention, Simon, that there are some over-the-top elements. And of course, the source material is Joe R. Lansdale, who actually has his own documentary out this year about him, but he wrote Bubba Hotep. So I think, you know, people that are familiar with his work will definitely know what they're in for with The Pale Door.
It's campy. And the thing is that there's that element, but there are also these elements that are, you know, nice original little MacGuffins that are thrown in here and there. You know, the ones that are slightly different to what we've seen in this kind of genre before. And we've seen that done. Bubba Hotep is another really good example where, you know, yes, it was a crazy kind of idea, but there were so many things in there that were really unique that you hadn't seen before, or certainly weren't, you know, brought into, you might have seen outside of the genre, but not in a genre movie like this. And that, to me, that alone really kind of elevated it to a point where it's like, it is something different, but there's enough there that, because I find that some people, especially with movies that are VOD or streaming, they're a little bit reticent to try something new because it's so new. It's so out of their ballpark. But this, I think, is a really nice, what I call a bridge movie, where, you know, even if you are a hardcore genre fan, say a horror fan, there's enough of that in there. If you like Westerns, if you want something with a little bit more edge, there's those elements for you there as well. And there are these other little nuggets in there that I think really are the good payoff. And I mean, it flew by at 90 minutes. It absolutely flew by. It felt like a 60-minute movie. And to be honest with you, that in itself is great, because you're checking your phone in a movie or you're distracted by something else, it means it's not being done particularly well and there's fat. This is another really good example of a very lean and effective movie.
Yeah, to kind of go off your VOD comment too really quickly, a lot of people are reticent to go to VOD because it's VOD, and they think that's something that won't come out in theaters if theaters were still open. This still would have just went to maybe 1 or 2 and then played just straight to VOD, and people go, oh, well, it's not worth my time. And no, like that's not it at all. Like this is that good bridge movie where you can watch it and go, oh, indie movies do have really creative, imaginative ideas, and people are trying these big swing kind of concepts. And I think The Pale Door kind of fits in that too. Not perfect by any means. It's like a solid middle of the road 3 out of 5 for me, but I think it's a lot better as a horror film. The Western stuff is kind of almost like Hallmark Western at times, like the beginning especially, and you're kind of like, all right, this kind of has like a Lifetime feel. Let's just get to the gore and the goop. But then when you get to that point and you get to the bordello of blood, as we'll kind of say it, totally influenced by From Dusk Till Dawn too, and it's a lot of fun. And I'm going to go back to that practical statement, because you see the women in their full form. I guess we won't go full spoilers of what you see, but that practical makeup application is wonderful, and it's so great to see. And they're climbing on the walls and the ceilings and things like that, and defying gravity because that's what they can do. I had a lot of fun, and also you mentioned the cast, kind of stacked with like veteran character actors between Bill Sage and like Noah Segan. And even like Zachary Knighton, and I'm just like looking at the IMDb real quick, but you have all these names of people that really ham it up. Pat Healy. Why am I forgetting Pat Healy? Of course, they know how to command these characters, and they know how to play the sneaky, slimy, bookkeeper, or just the lone gunman or stuff like that. They know how to evoke these characters in a way that are cartoonish, but still, that's exactly what you want to see as they're shooting. Well, again, we won't say what they are, but women of the night.
I'm a huge fan of Aaron Kuntz. I loved Camera Obscura. I loved his segment and Scare Package. This film didn't really hit it for me in the way that I wanted. I think it was dealing with way too many themes and way too many storylines. I just didn't think it all came together. But having talked to him, I know how incredibly personal this movie was to him. And I think it was really ambitious, and he did, though I may not have loved it as his earlier films, I can still see why it's so important to him and why he went down the road that he went down. And to Matt's point, I mean, you have these incredible character actors, Noah Segan, who I love to see continuously in horror. Pat Healy is fucking hysterical, and they do bring it home. I just think that the storylines kind of became a little too, it's like, are we a Western? Are we a horror? Are we all about witches? Or are we about werewolves? I'm not saying which is what, but I think it just became a little, in a short amount of time, it was just a lot of things. But that's the great thing about film, is that it's subjective to people, and some love it, and sometimes it just doesn't hit those notes.
I was really surprised to see it's getting like slammed kind of on Rotten Tomatoes, which it's weird. It's like sub 40% right now, and it's so hard to track these films. Like when you watch a screener and you kind of write your review, and I'm like, I wonder which side I'm going to be on. Like going back to Peninsula, I'm like, all right, like maybe I'm going to be one of a handful of people that love it. No, I appear to be the only one that loves it. And again, for The Pale Door, I'm kind of like, oh, like Pale Door, like that's, it's going to be 3 out of 5 for a lot of people. It's going to hit the right notes, but not like take over. And, that was my review, and it comes out, and like, apparently that's a minority opinion. And I'm kind of like, what? And then I look at these other films that have like a 60-70%, and I'm like, did we watch the same film? It is always, it's funny. It's how this game works, but I'll never understand it.
But at the end of the day, I'm just glad that people are getting their films out, and people are able to watch them. So sorry.
Every film is not.
For me, I think this is, it'll find an audience. But I think the audience will grow over the years out of word of mouth. And I never think it'll be a huge movie, but I do think it's going to be on some people's fun movies that you probably have never heard of. And I have a handful of those in my bag of tricks, but I think this is definitely going to be in there for people.
I can't wait to use this on like a streaming column update someday when it hits Netflix or something. And I can go, great, you can now watch it here. Like it's already in my pocket. Like I already know I'm going to use it for that.
Yep, it's one of those movies.
Dude doesn't want to see Pat Healy as a slimy bookkeeper.
You know what? I don't know who, and I'm going to comment on whoever's reviews say that.
All right. Well, this was a great episode. Real quick, we're going to go around the table. We're going to start with Stacey and then go to Simon, Shannon, and Matt, you'll close us out. Just name, outlet, and where people can find you, starting with Stacey.
All right. Womeninhorror.com is my website, or I'm on Facebook and Instagram under Stacey Lane Wilson.
All right. Thank you, Stacey.
You can find me at Showbiz Simon on Instagram and Twitter. Also, I have a Facebook page. This is Simon Thompson. You can see my work, Forbes, sometimes in Variety, various other places. And also, I write and produce the Rotten Tomatoes watch list on Quibi, which is a show not too dissimilar to this, where basically we recommend things that you should watch and films on a theme. So if you have Quibi, then A, thank you. And B, download it and check that out. I write and produce that every day. So enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Matt.
You can find my work at Donatobomb, as it says right over there. Yeah, right there. Right there. At Donatobomb, Letterboxd, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also find my writing at places such as Whatcha Watch, Plex, /film, and I'll just post wherever I show up on my Twitter. So, yeah, give a follow.
Thank you. And Shannon.
You can find me under Nightmarish with a 1 at the R1SH. I have to go to bed. Also, you can find me at Shannon_Mccrew on Twitter or Horror Design Chick on Instagram.
All right. Thank you. All right. And I'm Scott Menzel. Thank you so much for watching and supporting all episodes of What You're Watching so far. If you checked out one or multiple episodes, we appreciate it. We are a critics organization. So everyone who's participating in this video is a member of the organization. No one is getting paid to do these shows. We're doing them out of passion and love for the craft. What? So if you like it, the best thing you can do for any of us is just share it and help everyone else in the organization grow more and have a bigger following. So thank you so very much for watching, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Take care and see you soon.